Well, there we go. The Frankford Arsenal X-10 progressive press. It's been 2 months and a day since I first cranked this up with 308 cases. I'm doing some 223s right now, all mixed brass. I've got a few military cases that have never been fired or resized twice, meaning that they had to have their primer pockets swaged. It just goes right through them all. Well, the honeymoon's over, and I know that quite a number of you said to report back after I had a chance to really use it and put it through its paces. And I know I had a few people out there who kind of doubted that I would still enjoy this press after all that time. Well, let me tell you, I've gone through lots of 223, about 250 308. I've changed it over. I know it, I would say, about as well as I'm ever going to know this machine. I love it. I still love the gal after the honeymoon. It's great. Now, I know that there are some problems out there. People are experiencing a couple of issues, and I'll talk about that. They're not machine issues. They're operation issues. And that's exactly what it is. Sometimes people don't pay due attention to this is absolutely essential. If you don't read this, don't blame anything. You know, the owner's manual covers everything explicitly, and you know, you have to take time to actually read the text and to do exactly what it says verbatim, because if you don't do that, you could actually have serious problems right up front, and you'll be wondering why you can't resolve them. So take time to read the manual. So I'll go through what I think about the machine, because I really enjoy it. I think it works fabulously. Is it the machine for you? Well, that's a very subjective question. That's an entirely subjective question, depending on what your needs are. First of all, what is the machine? If you haven't watched my previous videos regarding this machine a couple of months ago, please take time to do that. I went through the whole series of what was in the box, how to put it together, get it set up, adjusted, and all that stuff. And I started out with some 308 cases. So if you haven't watched those, take time to do that. But I'll talk about it right now anyway, and this will give you an idea whether you should even bother watching those other videos. This is a highly sophisticated machine. There's a lot of machinery here. There's 10 stations available for your use. You're not going to need them all in order to operate this machine. I'm currently using 8 of the holes, 8 stations. And that's really all I need to have for the 223. That's more than sufficient. Yeah, I could add a couple of other things, but it's totally unnecessary with the cartridge that I'm doing. Because it's such a sophisticated machine, there's a lot going on. Each one of those stations has to be specifically and precisely adjusted the way the manual explains. It's not hard to do. And once you get it going, it runs flawlessly. This machine is absolutely running flawlessly. And again, I'll talk about the caveats, some of the things that people are having issues with. And I know that there's a lot of hate and grumbling about these issues, but it's resolvable very, very simply. It's so resolvable, it's unbelievable. But if you're a person who really needs to have a lot of ammo to shoot, I mean, I'm talking about a lot of ammo. I'm not talking about just 300 or 400 rounds. I'm talking about if you need to have 500, 1,000, 2,000, or inexhaustible supply of ammo, this is the kind of machine to have. You're talking about an investment that's worth considering when you're getting close to $1,000. By the time you get it set up with the shell holder, you're over $1,000. And that's not small change. You can get semi-progressive presses. You can get semi-progressive presses, which means that you only get one cartridge after every 4 cranks of the handle, those will still turn out an awful lot of ammo. And those are more than satisfactory for the person who's only going to burn up maybe 50 or 100 rounds in the course of a day. If you're a person who needs to have a lot of ammo, though, this is the type of machine that might best serve you. So, I really would not even consider a machine like this if your idea is to, load 400 or 500 38s and 400 or 500 9 millimeters, and then switch to 223 and then 308 and blah blah blah. Having a whole array of different cartridges that you're going to be reloading on a rotational basis. This is probably not the machine for that, unless you really like tinkering, because there's a changeover. There's a lot of changeover in setup requirement to convert from one cartridge to another. Don't let anybody kid you. It's not simply a matter of swapping off tool heads. The tool head is only one aspect of it. There's a lot more going on. There's adjustment. You have to, I'll bring you over here and show you the different parts, but there's these case retention buttons that have to be changed off if you're going from a large diameter case to a small diameter case. You've got to remove the case feed mechanism and to change the plunger, and perhaps the tube adapter that goes inside that for different size cases. In order to change the shell plate, you always have to remove the priming mechanism with its 4 screws, and then you also have to remove this retention ring, and there's 6 more screws there. And remember, every time you unscrew something, you got to screw it back in. Some of these things are a little bit on the fussy side, especially these buttons here. There's a lot, and then you have to change out your powder hopper, fix that back up with whatever adjustment you need for your new cartridge. So let's bring you up and show you some of the tooling that's required to change it over. I want to digress a little bit, because I don't want to just leave it by saying that it's a great machine without you understanding exactly what you're getting into with this machine. So let's step over here. So starting with the shell plate, this rotational shell plate. This is beautifully made, by the way. It's all ball bearings. This is a massive piece of machinery here. I love it. The way it's constructed is unlike anything I've seen in the reloading business. It's highly professional. Nothing on that has to be changed. This is simply a drop-in part. But now we come to we have 5 Allen wrenches for a reason. There's an awful lot of screws going on, and you're going to be changing. Sometimes it's a little bit frustrating, because you have to keep changing from one size to another. Everything is a different size, Allen wrench. So that can be a little bit of a tedium after a while. You grab for one and you say, oh, that ain't it, and then you got to go back to the other one because you forgot what size goes into what particular screws. So that's a little of a Magilla. You've got to change out the powder measure actuators. In other words, these engage the case and cause the powder measure to pop up and down. The base of it engages the case. So those have to be installed. That means disassembling the powder measure. And you really have to keep, instead of turning paging to the required section, it's really preferable to have yourself a chart, type yourself up a chart and put it on your wall, so that you know which parts go best with which parts are required for whichever caliber that you're using. And that brings us to the swage and priming rods. These right here, swaging rods are not required for a lot of cases. They're not required for anything except crimped-in primers. But in the case that that's a very common thing, especially if you're using military cases of any kind with crimp primers, then the swaging rod is necessary. That requires the removal of the previous one, and insertion of this one and adjusting of it. Adjusting it up and down for the proper depth is a little bit tedious and time consuming. You can figure on as much as 8 or 10 minutes to get each of these adjusted, the depth of the swage pin and the depth of the priming pin. You can use an old case with a spent primer as a gauge to determine how tightly you adjust this priming rod, and that's a good way to begin. And then it only requires sometimes a very, very small adjustment, but still, it's an adjustment that has to be done. And it's not. It means opening up the side of the press and monkeying around with tight quarters. The other thing is these case positioners. I can't really get one out easily here. Let me see if I can use this. These little doodads right here are buttons that, see if I can bring this in closer so you can see. These little buttons right here, the smaller one goes with the larger case. It basically positions the case in the shell holder in the position that's necessary so it doesn't drift around. Changing those out is quite tedious. I prefer not to tighten the screws with using the Allen wrench on the cap screw underneath. I prefer to just hold the cap screw in place firmly with my finger and tighten it down with a screwdriver on the other side so I can do the same thing to remove it. To try to find the hole on the cap screw underneath this machine when you're upside down is very, very difficult, especially for some of the screws which have they're in hidden locations. So there's no reason in the world I don't have those. I don't have those down tight with a wrench. They're just simply tight, holding my finger on the screw side and putting the nut on with a screwdriver until my finger slips off of it. So that's all there is to it. That's a little hint. Now you've got the case plungers. There are 3 different case plungers that you've got to use for each of the different type of cartridges you have. And so again, that's something you want to have yourself a chart, a handy reference sheet so that you can look and see which one you need. And then you have these tube adapters. These have to be put in specifically for the length and diameter of the cases that you're using. All that has to be referenced, and they all have to be changed out. The priming mechanism is, I think this is one of the most fascinating and reliable priming mechanisms I have ever seen, and it's really safe. The priming tube is not situated near where, even if you had an accidental impact explosion on the primer that's going into place, even if you had that, nothing would happen because the primer stack is an inch away from the actual live primer that's being inserted. So it's a fabulous system, and it comes with an adapter here for your alarm. This is all metal. It's very, very well engineered, but that requires 4 screws that have to be changed out right here, and they're recessed, and they're a little bit finicky to get a wrench in there, an Allen wrench positioned in the middle of the cap screw. So all these little things. Sure, it's only another couple of seconds to find that Allen head position. But when you start getting tired of doing this over and over again, and the Allen wrench still keeps on being uncooperative, it's something you have to put up with. It's a tedium that's required. So it all goes with the game. Now, I would seriously recommend that if you're really interested in efficiently changing over from one cartridge to another, seriously consider getting a separate tool head. Yes, you can remove some of these dies and just simply replace them without changing the position of your lock ring. That's fine as it goes, but some dies you have to put the lock ring on the underside because the thickness of this massive steel tool head requires that you have sufficient number of threads in order to secure it. So this sizing die, which is an essential die to be adjusted each time perfectly, that has to be completely removed before you can taken apart before you can put it back in again. You just can't unthread it straight down through. So that's one of the things that you have to consider. There are a couple of other dies that have to be, the bullet seating die also didn't have enough threads on the top, so I had to reverse it and put it underneath. And the book details that. That's something that's not an uncommon problem. Depending on the die manufacturer and the length of the die body, that's the sort of thing that you might have. I recommend, you can't really see it here, but I recommend, I'll take this out so you can see it, and this one is a die that can go back in very easily and repositioned without having to change its adjustment. This is a centering die. It's got a nylon bushing on the inside, and I don't know if that's focusing. That nylon bushing on the inside, that assures that when the case is inserted into this die, that it aligns the shelf plate perfectly so that it can't be askew. That's a fabulous die to have for a lot of different presses, but especially for this one. Anything where alignment of the priming system is vital. I'll thread that back down later. And moving on to the powder measure. The powder measure, I think, is perfection in itself. I mean, it's extremely smooth. The adjustment is easy to make. It sets up like any powder measure of its type. But now this is the critical thing that people are running into. I'm seeing a lot of griping and complaining because people have got powder spillage all over their press. Well, I'm sorry to say that's their fault. That has nothing to do with the press whatsoever. There's a drop of almost seven or 8 inches. I'm going to just let's see. Oh yeah, it's easily 7 or 8 inches from the top of this, from where the drum exits. And if you consider that the powder is actually in the drum, it has to fall from the very top of this drum up here all the way down to the case. Now the powder has got to also go through a hole that's just slightly bigger than 3/16 of an inch in diameter. It's a fairly small hole. You can see it right here. And because it has to go through that diameter hole, and it has to basically, take its time traveling down through that tube before it travels down into the case. So you're talking about a distance that's from the top of the drum, which is loaded with powder, all the way to the base of the case, when the handle's all the way down. So you're talking 6 or 7 inches of travel through that small opening. If you noticed, it might have looked like a sluggish operation. You're probably wondering why it couldn't go any faster. Well, it's because of that. As I cycle this press down, I am stopping at the bottom while I retrieve a bullet. Once I retrieve the bullet, then I move it up. That gives me basically a count of 1. In other words, down, gather a bullet, and then raise it up. Down, 1, and then raise it up. Down, 1, and then raise it up. A count of 1 when you're down there. That'll give that gravity time to pull that powder down into the case. And so I don't have any spillage whatsoever. I can easily have an awful lot of massive spillage if I operate quickly, because I'm lifting the powder measure basically off the case before it even has a chance to charge. You're filling up a case which is, you could have a case which is a 3006 case. That has to completely fill up. This is not like using a powder measure, on your loading bench where you're basically only dropping 1 inch or so until it gets into the case. This is a situation where it's got to drop all the way down. So never mind that complaint. If you're having that issue, just slow down and take it easy. And not only that, but operating at that cyclic rate is very, very efficient. You don't get tired, you don't get bored. and it's not haphazard. I maintain this rhythm, this constant rhythm, so that it keeps me focused. So how fast does this machine work? Well, at the pace that I was going, I was running at 10 rounds per minute. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in 10 minutes, that's 100 rounds. And in 1 hour, that's 600 rounds. With 223 cases, I can go as fast as 720 rounds per hour. I can do 12 rounds per minute. But I'm verging on a couple of cases, might have a few kernels of powder that don't quite make it. So I rather keep it to 10 rounds per minute, and everything stays nice and smooth, and I have no powder spillage whatsoever. So as I say, it can go as fast. If you don't mind a little bit of powder trickling out here and there, you know, when your cadence is off just a tiny bit, you can do up to 720 rounds per hour. And so that's, you know, you're talking 120 rounds in 10 minutes. That's a phenomenally fast pace. Certain things that I've seen, you certainly don't need to have some of the tooling that I see people buying to set this machine up. This machine does not call for big, you know, fancy, sexy T-handled Allen wrenches. It's, you know, the Allen wrenches that come with it is more than sufficient. Or you can use a screwdriver with a Allen wrench. You know, one of these deals. But you know, by the time you change it out and everything, in the long run, it's just as fast to use a standard Allen wrench. The other thing too, you know, big Allen wrenches like that, you can't fit them into some of the recesses. There's a lot of screws to remove when you are changing out this shelf plate. By the time you get it all done, you've taken 6 screws out of this retaining ring. You've taken 4 screws out of this case feed mechanism, another 4 screws out of this priming mechanism, and if you've changed out this diameter case, you've got another 8 of these screws here that you have to accommodate, plus 4 screws on this housing, the side of the housing, in order to expose the priming rod and the swage rod. And then there's 2 screws at the top of this drum. Those have to be removed in order to disconnect the drum from the die. So everything is tedious. I would say that even a person who's mechanically adroit, I'm a very, very proficient person when it comes to tooling, and I would say that 2 hours at the least. You gotta figure on 2 hours by the time you get it all done. That's working right straight through without any breaks. And there's the usual setup issues, you know, as far as making sure your dies are adjusted properly. Another issue too is people apparently don't heed the warning that every one of these dies, unless the manufacturer of the die says otherwise, every one of those dies should be contacting firmly down onto this plate. When I say firmly, it means contact the plate and then give it another quarter turn. That means that every one of those dies on every stroke is pressing firmly down on that plate to keep it rigid. You don't want to have the plate, that's a big diameter, and it mechanically, in order for that thing to turn, it's got to have sufficient play in order for it to not bind. And as a result, you'll have just a little, it's not much, it's only a couple of thousandths of an inch, few thousandths of an inch, but you don't want to have that plate tilting. So make sure that that's all those dies, unless the die manufacturer says otherwise for a particular die, make sure that they contact and bottom out on that plate firmly. So there you have it. I really like it. I really do. But be sure it's for you before you go laying out over $1,000 for this machine. Make sure that you need that kind of ammo. If you do, I don't think you can get a better machine on the planet. Not for that price, I can guarantee you. It's just not going to happen. Unless somebody has changed catalog prices in the last 2 months that I'm not aware of. There's an awful lot of money being spent out there for lesser machines than this. And it works flawlessly. It produces absolutely factory-like ammunition time and time again. It's just a wonderful machine. I can count on this to always turn out stellar stellar ammunition. It's just great. And with the least amount of lubrication. Don't over lubricate your case. These cases you can see are just barely hazy. I'm using the Lee lubricant. I really endorse this stuff. I don't work for Lee. I couldn't care less about their company, except they make fabulous dyes, and their resizing lubricant. It's metal forming lubricant used in the industry for all kinds of metal forming, for auto bodies and all sorts of stuff. It lubricates dyes to keep metal moving in forming operations. This is not made for the reloading industry. This is made for. This is actually a product. It has the name of it on it. You can look it up. You can get this in big 50-gallon drums, I think. Well, I don't see it on the tube. There is a name for this stuff, and I've seen it elsewhere. But this is packaged by somebody for Lee. But anyway, I endorse that stuff because it doesn't get your machine all gooped up. You don't want to have slimy, slippery, unnecessary amount of lubricant. These are really dry. I mean, and it just washes off. I can take all my cases, put them in the sink with warm water, because ammunition is completely waterproof. Put them in with some Dawn dish detergent, warm water, slosh them around, and just rinse them off, and then dry them on a towel. Roll them. I put them in the towel, and I grab both ends, and I just toss them back, seesaw them back and forth, and they're dry in a matter of a minute. So that's how I do it. It's very simple. And when I toss them, I put all those cases that are in there. I've got over 150 cases that I just did. I just put 3 daubs. It's less than I would put on, a toothbrush. 3 daubs of lubricant in the bottom of this tub, and I shake it around and swirl it around until they're all hazy. And that's all there is to it. And you can add more if you need it. If that's not enough, and add another dot. And then, when I say a dot, this is probably about the size of a large medicine capsule. That's all I'm putting in there, 2 or 3 dots. So that's it. It's a matter of discernment. Decide for yourself before you go and invest in this thing, and make sure that you need to have that sort of machinery. And like I say, the changeover. If you're only going to be doing a couple of 100 cases at a time and then changing them out for a different caliber, you really do better by simply getting yourself a semi-progressive press and spending that time loading ammo rather than changing a machine over. It's the sort of thing that has to go on in the factory when they change over from one product to another. They have to close down the factory for a few days or a week or something before they get everything up and running again. And this is the same thing on a small scale. You're talking about a couple of 3 hours to change it over. So think carefully about that before you go and spend that sort of money and time. Thank you to everybody for your support, especially my Patreon donors. You're really helping me along with this sort of thing. Buying these bullets so that I can do this, and buying primers. Primers are so expensive these days, and buying powder. This thing goes for a whopping amount of powder. So there was all these things, and this is certainly not all that I've got to invest in. There's so many other things too, the guns and the shooting and all that stuff. Things are getting pretty cold right now. It was 16 degrees here this morning, so shooting activity at the range is going to slow down a little bit. But hopefully I can get out again before too long. And but I want to thank everybody. Please, right now, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe. Hit the subscribe and hit the bell so you know when I'm back. That's it. I appreciate your attention, and I'll keep working on answering any questions that you might have regarding this machine and other loading questions too. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. God bless.